So, hi everybody. My name is Daniela Pirraglia. I'm an associate registrar here at Innis College, and I also manage all of Innis's awards and grants. So, thanks for joining us today. It's great to meet all of you online. So my hope for today's session is that by the end of the session, the people who are here will have a better sense of what the costs are associated with attending the University of Toronto, to know the various resources that may be available to you while you're here, and also to see budgeting as a guide that will help you make financial decisions as you move throughout your years here at the University of Toronto. So on this slide, you can see the tuition fees for the upcoming year. There are two ways to be charged fees. There's program fees and course fees. Now, for the vast majority of people here today, you will be charged a flat program fee. All students are charged the flat program fee when their invoice is created in July. There are certain instances where you may be eligible for course fees, and on the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about what that looks like. There's also the full-time incidentals that you see here. Those are from 2023-2024. Student Accounts has not yet posted the 2024-2025 incidental fees yet. I think that they'll be relatively similar. There will be an increase. Probably it'll be just over $2,000-ish, but they haven't been finalized yet. So just want to put a caveat there. There are certain incidentals that you may be able to opt out of. So the main one being the health and dental benefits. So if you have alternate coverage for health benefits, so if you are a dependent on your parents' plan and that's going to continue while you're in university, then you are able to opt out of the health plan. And I believe with the dental, the rules are like a little bit more flexible. So there will be information about that later in the summer. And just know that the window to opt out of those plans comes very soon, so you have to do it. I believe it's normally a deadline of end of September. So if that's something that you're interested in and you can't find that information, then you can always reach out to us and we can share more. So as I mentioned, there is a difference between paying program fees and paying course fees. So as I already said, all students are initially charged a flat program fee in the fall and winter sessions. If you are taking 3.5 full credit equivalents or less in year one, then you could be eligible for course fees. I think the main thing I want to drive home on this particular slide is that the academic and the financial deadlines differ quite dramatically, and so the decision timing to make the decision to pay per course happens quite early in the fall and the winter term. So if some students may think, like, why would I want to pay course fees? Why would I elect to take less courses than the regular 5 and 5? Maybe that you have to work for the upcoming year, or you want to work, or you have other special circumstances. That would be one reason why you are thinking about reducing your course load. And I think the best thing to do would be to reach out to us, reach out to registrar.innis@utoronto.ca, and we can have a conversation about what it would look like if you do want to take a smaller course load and pay per course. So I believe in my colleagues' presentations, they touched on registration status. So I'm going to go into it in a little bit more detail right now. So right now, if you were to log into Acorn, you will see that you have an invite status, invited to register. And that means you are invited to enroll in courses for the upcoming fall-winter session. The next step that you have to take after you enroll in courses in July is to actually get registered. So first you enroll in courses, then you get registered for the session. And the way that you do that is in August, you need to trigger registration. You need to take special steps. So you're either going to do that by making a payment, or you're going to defer based on OSAP or an out-of-province financial loan or a major award if you have been selected to receive a major award. And I'll talk about what major award, how that is defined in a future slide. And lastly, if you fail to get registered, then you will be financially canceled. So think good. And that means that you are not registered for the upcoming session, and you will also be removed from all your courses. We do send reminders about the deadline, like as we approach it, and the faculty registrar's office will also send reminders. So it's important to just keep an eye out on your U of T email so that you can make sure that you're not at risk of getting canceled when maybe that's not what you actually want to happen. So there are various items available on Acorn. I've called this financial items. So tax documents. Come February 2025, there will be tax documents available on Acorn that you can use to file your Canadian taxes. There's also direct deposit, a spot where you can add direct deposit information. I recommend that you do that now, that you add your direct deposit information in Acorn, like this summer as you enroll in courses. The reason I recommend that is it just makes getting a refund much more easy and fast. If you don't have direct deposit information and you are eligible for a refund for whatever reason, maybe you got an award and it created a credit, or maybe something changed in your status and that caused a credit on your account, it will be sent to a Canadian mailing address in whatever's on Acorn, assuming that exists. And in my experience, checks take longer. So they're just, they have to be actually processed by a human being, and they have to be put in an envelope, and they have to be mailed. And then sometimes they get lost, and then it's just more work for you to get that check reissued. And so that's why I'm recommending that you add direct deposit information now. The other things you can do on Acorn in terms of your finances is this is where you're going to access your OSAP and your out of province financial aid deferral if that's something that you're eligible for. You can produce a confirmation of enrollment for your RESP. And so for some students, maybe you just need a standard letter for your bank that confirms that you, the student, are enrolled in the upcoming term. If you do just need a standard letter, then you can actually do that yourself on Acorn. I believe that will be available after you enroll in courses. So I don't think that's something that you can access right now. If you have a more complicated form, so like it's a set form by your financial organization that asking for more detailed information, needs perhaps a registrar signature, then you can email that to registrar.innis and we can fill that out for you. But just note that we do not fill out those forms until after you're actually enrolled in courses, because at this point, there's nothing for us to be able to confirm other that you were admitted to U of T and that you accepted your offer. At this stage, that's all that we could confirm. And lastly, your invoice is available or will be available on Acorn mid-July. So on your invoice are something that I've called your formal costs, and that's what actually is showing up on your invoice. So it will be your tuition, incidentals, auxiliary fees if you're taking a specific course that requires, a bio course that has a special lab fee attached to it, a residence fee if you are in, either the Innis residence or perhaps you are at Chestnut. And if that's the case, then it'll be your residence and your meal plan will be on your invoice. Those are all the costs, like I've said, that I've called them formal costs, and those are on your U of T invoice. And then we have some informal costs that are not on your invoice, and that could be rent, transit, books, food, etc. And so a little bit later in the presentation, I'm going to talk in more detail about the various costs specifically. So as I already mentioned, there's a few different ways to get registered. So the first way we're going to talk about is making a payment from within Canada. So as you can see here, I have a sample invoice listed on the little picture, Miss Isabel Robinson. The highlighted amount where it says Rosie account, Rosie account, that number, Robin, and then her student number, that is her account number. And so you will find your account number on your Acorn invoice. I believe that's really the only place that you can find it. It's a combination of your last name and your student number. So if you are going to pay using online banking, which is if you are paying from a Canadian bank, that is how I would recommend. Just set up an online bill, just like you pay your cell phone bill or your credit card bill. Make U of T the payee, and then add your account number just by copying and pasting it right from Acorn. You can also go in person to pay in your bank if you prefer, and then you could just print your invoice and bring that to them. You can pay by credit card on Acorn. There is a section in the financial section where you can say like make a payment by credit card, and you click and it kind of takes you to another screen where you can enter information. In general, I don't recommend paying by credit card. There is a 2.5% convenience fee. in my personal opinion, I think whatever points you or your parents may get from your credit card will be, the cost of the community will likely outweigh those points. But, there are certain situations where, maybe you have to pay by a credit card, or you really want to. And so just know that that is also an option. And I know we have lots of people from outside of Canada here on this call, and so you're going to be potentially making a payment from outside of Canada. So in that case, you're going to pay via Convera or Flywire. I recommend that you give lots of time to process these payments by deadlines. In general, if you're paying from a Canadian bank, we say 3 to 5 business days. I think Convera and Flywire say something similar, but in my experience, it's just better to pay a little bit earlier, just so that you know that it's taken care of and that you're registered by the August 27th deadline. And please do not pay more than your tuition, your residence, your meal plan, and your other fees listed on your Acorn invoice. Okay, so just pay what is on your invoice. So there are some students here who are getting OSAP, or out of province aid, and you will be able to defer your fees on OSAP. So there's a deferral button that will be available to you later in the summer, and you'll be able to defer your fees based on that. If you have any issues with that, you can always email us. There are also students who have a major award who will be able to defer based on that award. So if your fall winter 2024-2025 installment of your award is more than your minimum payment to register, which you will be able to see on your invoice starting mid-July, if whatever that award is exceeds that minimum payment required, you can defer based on that award. I know I have here that on this slide here that you have to submit a form and to email us, but we actually just got an email last night from another office saying that there will be an online process where you can do it through Acorn. I would say if you have any questions, or if you think you're eligible to defer based on a major award and you don't see that option come early August, then email us and we can walk you through what that process looks like. There may be a few students who still have to do the paper form for whatever reason. So just know that that's an option for you. And it is a benefit that for this first year, if you have it, you should take it, because it does mean that the rest of your fees aren't due until the end of April if you defer based on a major award. So we're going to spend a little bit of time about the various resources that you may or may not be coming in with, and to just have a better sense of what could be available to you while you're here. So firstly, you might have personal savings. So maybe you've worked in the past, maybe you're working this summer and you're going to have some money saved up. You may be expecting support from your family, so your parents or your caregivers, grandparents. Maybe they've said, okay, we're going to cover your fees. We're going to give you X dollars a month to help towards your living costs. You may have an RESP, and that's where you're the beneficiary, and so that's something I would talk to your parents about now. About what do the disbursements look like from your RESP over the next 4 or 5 years that you're here. I think the biggest point I want to drive home is that really you should be talking with your family today as you make plans, and have really clear expectations of you as the student, of your parents, and the parents of your child. Okay, so just try to have open and honest dialogues about what help you can provide your child and what you expect of your child. And I think that can go a long way in helping make a solid financial plan right from the onset. So I'm sure there are students here in the room today who are eligible for OSAP. So I'm going to spend just a couple of slides talking about what OSAP is. It is a federal provincial financial aid program for students attending university. You do need to be a Canadian citizen, permanent resident, or a protected person. So any students who are here on a study permit, unfortunately, you would not be eligible for this funding. For OSAP specifically, there is a residency requirement, so you have to have lived in Ontario for at least 12 consecutive months without attending full-time post-secondary school. So if you went to high school in Ontario and you're a Canadian citizen or permanent resident, then most likely you're eligible for OSAP. There may be some Americans in this room who have dual citizenship. So, you also have Canadian citizenship. Maybe you as a student, you've never even lived in Canada, but you're a Canadian citizen. I just want to say that if you are a Canadian citizen, you should be eligible for funding, or a permanent resident. You should be eligible for funding from one province or another. What province that is will depend on if you ever lived in Ontario, or if you're where did your parents last live. So if your parents last lived in Ontario, then most likely it's OSAP. If it was a different province, then you may be eligible for funding from that province, not necessarily from Ontario. So if you have any questions about that, please feel free to email me after this meeting, and I can, I might not have the exact answer, but I can help connect you with the University Registrar's Office, who can help you figure out what province you should be applying to. Applications are open now, and I would encourage you to apply now, just to give lots of time to have the application processed. So OSAP is typically made up of grants and loans, and grants do not need to be repaid. OSAP is interest-free while you are in school, so as long as you do not take off more than 6 months between full-time study periods, then they do not go into repayment, and there is no interest accrued. And note that federal loans are actually interest-free on an ongoing basis. So this was a change that was made during COVID that then became permanent. And so at this point, anyways, federal loans are interest-free, even when you finish school. OSAP is largely based on parental income on your course load and where you live during the school year. So whether you live with your parents or whether you live on your own, like away from home. And OSAP is always directed to your U of T fees first. So if come September, you've deferred your fees based on OSAP and you haven't made a payment yet, then your OSAP would first go towards your invoice, and then if there's any fall OSAP remaining, it would be issued to you directly. If you are staying in residence and you have fees to pay, then most likely your fall OSAP would go entirely towards your invoice, and you wouldn't expect to receive any OSAP to you directly unless you made a payment earlier. And if you're ever uncertain about what to do, then you should just apply. I always recommend to students to apply, get your estimate. Actual assessments are going to start rolling out come early July. And if you decide at that point, like, I want to stop, I don't want to do this, like, whatever, my parents don't want me to do this, for whatever reason, you can just don't proceed anymore with the application, because there are going to be forms that you and your parents are going to have to sign. So you just wouldn't fill out those forms. And there is also an option to cancel your application after you've begun it. So there is also out-of-province financial aid. So if you're from another province in Canada, then each province has its own financial aid program. You should definitely be applying to your home province. There is an out-of-province request portal hosted by the University Registrar's Office, where you can submit certain loan documents that you might maybe need U of T to complete. And this is also how out-of-province students enable their fee deferral on ACORN. You do need, like, the university doesn't necessarily know that, oh, you're from Quebec and you have a Quebec student loan. So you have to tell us that in order to enable your deferral. And so you would also be doing that through the request portal. If anyone has questions about OSAP or the out-of-province aid from another province, the University Registrar's Office is the office that actually has access to your applications. I don't have access. Can see very summary data for OSAP, and I really can't see any data for out-of-province students. So I'm happy to help answer questions if you're not sure where to go, or I'm happy to try to answer your questions. I had OSAP as a student, so I am familiar with it and familiar with it through my years of work here. But if you have a really specific question, I may direct you to the University Registrar's Office, just because they actually have access to your application and they can see much more detail than I can. So UTAPS is a U of T grant that is meant to cover unmet financial need. And it is a grant, so it does not need to be repaid. You do need to, again, to be a Canadian citizen, a protected person, or a permanent resident in order to be eligible for this funding. And you do need to be receiving OSAP or out-of-province aid or Indigenous funding to be eligible. This award is also managed by the University Registrar's Office. I recommend that you apply now. So if you're applying to OSAP or other provincial aid, you just do it when you apply for OSAP, then also apply for UTAP. Some of you may have already done it already, and if you have, that's great. Just make sure you do also apply for OSAP or out of province aid if you have already applied for UTAPs. We recommend applying by September 18th. If you do go to this website here, you'll see there's a whole bunch of different deadlines. In general, I just recommend you do it now. That way, if you are eligible, it means the money will still flowing to you as soon as possible. For students on OSAP, assuming you meet all the deadlines, you could potentially get funding as early as October. And for out of province students, it would be more like December. So it's just important to apply as soon as possible. So we do have various awards available from Innis College specifically, and so I've kind of lumped them into two groups. So I have our awards that are for automatic consideration. So those are awards where if you're eligible, you're automatically considered. You do not need to take any action. Most of those awards are for academic merit, and we look at students who have passed their 5th, 10th, 15th full credit equivalent. So that wouldn't be until after your first year, second year, third year. And we look at students who have a CGPA of 3.7 or higher. Those awards, I would say, are relatively small in nature. Like last year, they were around $400 each. But again, if you qualify, you don't have to do anything. You'll show up on my list. And if you are eligible, I will send you an email. So then the first time you would be eligible for something like this or potentially be eligible would be fall 2025. And then we have some awards that require an actual application. And so for those awards, they're mostly leadership based. We do have a few awards that are tied to, we call them like special identity awards. So an award for Black students, an award for Indigenous students. Those applications will all open typically in February. We send email newsletters. So you will be notified when those awards are available. For leadership specifically, it could be at Innis College, in the residence, at U of T, or even the external community. So if you're someone who's very involved and that involvement continues while you're at U of T, then I definitely encourage you to check out those applications because there is a fair number of awards and with a whole varying amount of values. And so it's worth at least looking at the application when you get that notice. We also have an Innis grant for students who either have provincial or OSAP aid and have unmet financial needs. So let's say, you're getting OSAP, we also expect you to apply for UTAPs, and then maybe you need a little bit of help with rent for a month or food or a little bit of tuition, something like that. That would be one reason to apply for that grant. And then the second reason is if you have some sort of emergency. So no matter, whether you're a domestic student or international student, if you do have a financial emergency, then definitely apply. And then I will meet with you one-on-one to talk about that application to see what we can do. That application is available on Acorn and it's starting October the 1st. The university also has a tool called Award Explorer, and on the next slide, I have a screenshot of what that looks like. It is a place where all awards across the whole university are listed, and so that's something to look at if you're interested in trying to find other awards that you could apply for. And as I've already mentioned, please do check out our monthly Registrar newsletter. Dryden spends a lot of time on it, and we do have an awards and financial aid section on that newsletter, and so even if you're just going to skim that section to see, okay, are there any awards I should be applying for or I could apply for, just skim that section. It won't include every single award across the whole campus, but it will include the bigger things. So this is a screenshot of what Award Explorer looks like. So you can see I have some search, it's a faceted search. So I've already, I put Innis, I put in course. You can change the citizenship, and then it gives you a list of awards that you might be eligible for. Each award will have more specific criteria potentially, so you would need to go through them one by one to see like, okay, what am I actually eligible to apply for? I know it might seem a bit onerous, but I promise it's better than what it used to be, where in previous years it was, awards were listed on individual department websites, and so you wouldn't even necessarily know where to go to get that information. So this is a step in the right direction. Some of you might be considering part-time work. I'll make a very, very general statement whereby, usually we don't recommend working in first year, especially if you have to commute, or if you're living downtown. There's just so much change that happens in your first year. Maybe it's the first time you're living away from home. Plus, you have school, which will look very different potentially from what high school looked like. And so, if possible, we recommend not working in first year, but we appreciate that some students want to work or maybe they need to work. And so, if you are making that choice to work, I encourage you to consider your timetable. What's your commuting time if you are commuting in from somewhere else? What other obligations do you have before you commit to your work hours? The university does have a job board with both internal and external positions. And then the university also offers something called work study positions, which are on campus jobs. These postings will be available starting on August the 16th. I think work study is a great way to get experience on campus. I would say, like, speaking as my own experience as an employer through the work study program, we understand that you're going to have really busy times where there's exam season. You're just not going to be as available as possibly like during the rest of the term. So I think in general, these kinds of positions will be a little more flexible than say you were working at a restaurant or working at a mall. So this is a good option to look into, whether in first year or an upper year, if that's something that you're interested in. So there may be instances where perhaps you need a bit of additional funding. And so if that's the case for, Canadians or permanent residents in the room, consider getting a line of credit from a Canadian bank if needed. There are fewer rules, so there's no academic progress like OSAP or other provincial aid has. But you most likely would need a cosigner. I doubt most students here would qualify on their own unless they, have really consistent, steady income. I do recommend you shop around for the best interest rate. So definitely like go to your home bank and see what they have to offer. But I would get at least one or two other quotes to see if there are better rates out there. And any international students on the call, you could check with your financial institution from your home country to see if there's any loans that you would be eligible for from there. Okay, and then this last section is just to spend a little bit of time talking about budgeting. So I really want you to think about budgeting as a guide and not as a restriction. So, like I said earlier, it's a tool to help you make financial decisions as you move throughout your years here. You do need to include both fixed and variable costs. I'm going to talk about what those look like. Budget for entertainment and other things that might be nice to have while you're here. There are lots of free budgeting templates out there. You can Google them. I have one that, if you're interested, just email me and I can share it with you. I personally pay for budgeting software. It's called You Need a Budget, YNAB. But there are so many different ways that you can budget that I think you have to spend a little bit of time looking at what works for you, even if it's just a spreadsheet or pen to paper in the summer where you write down roughly, these are my expenses and this is what income or resources I'm going to have available, just so you have an idea of what your shortfall or what your surplus might be. And then by doing it now in the summer, it gives you more time to figure out, okay, I do have a shortfall, so what are my other options? What can I look at? I am available to help if you need it. So if you want to meet one-on-one to make a budget or to review your specific circumstances, I'm happy to do so. So some of the fixed costs you should consider are the tuitions, your residence fees if you are in residence. If you have a meal plan, then that would be a fixed cost. If you're renting, then that would be a fixed cost. Again, these are things that remain stable or predictable from month to month. And then there are some variable costs. So the big one that I see are, I would say, food costs. So I see a whole range of food spending. And on the next slide, I have some examples of what I consider to be, reasonable expenses. Clothes, entertainment, toiletries. A lot of you will be paying for laundry, so that's something to consider. And then finally, transit costs. Again, transit can be highly variable if you're commuting from outside, and within the GTA, you're taking the GO train. Your transit costs could be a few $100s a month, and maybe it's even more of a fixed cost if like every month I'm spending $300 on GO Transit. So here are some cost estimates that I've come up with. So this is based on my own personal experience. In my role, I see lots of grant applications and I meet with students to make budgets. And so again, you might be spending more than that. And if you have the resources to do it, like that's totally fine. But if you are on a limited budget and you do want to, kind of rein in spending and spend reasonably, then I would say this is a good guide to kind of start your budget. And so food can be anywhere from $300 to $450 a month. That's mostly groceries. That's very little eating out. $450 a month is about $100 a week. And I think if you're grocery shopping $100 a week, you can eat relatively well for $100 a week. You might have some personal care costs. You maybe have some prescriptions or contacts that you have to buy for, monthly or quarterly or something like that. Cell phone is another area where it can really range. So if you are spending a lot on a cell phone, then maybe look into cheaper plans, especially if you own your phone outright. I know that's something that's on my own personal checklist that I need to do soon. I'm paying too much for my cell phone. And so there are options. Sometimes it does require switching providers, but that's an area where you could potentially save money. Books is another category I see a lot of variance on. I sometimes see students who aren't spending anything on books. I don't quite know how they make that work. I think there are a lot of profs who say that textbook is optional, or there are a lot of resources that are available just online, like your prof is linked to articles or something. And so I put $500 here, but just know that, I think a lot of students are even spending less than that. Transportation, I put $100, but that again, that could look much different for you personally. I think if you're living on campus, in a residence, then probably you could get around fine just by walking. I'm a big cyclist. I cycle everywhere. Or maybe you're just like tapping on and off with TTC a little bit. And then entertainment, again, I feel like I'm a bit of a broken record, but students can spend a little or a lot here. There are a lot of free things that you can do, campus events or going to the waterfront or parks or art installations. And so, yeah, definitely a place where you could save some money. So this slide is just the upcoming payment deadline. So the main deadline I want everyone to be aware of is the August 27th deadline to trigger registration. So that's the deadline to either pay your minimum payment, which will be on your invoice on Acorn starting mid-July. You'll be able to see what your minimum payment is. It's typically the full fall fees, whatever that is. Or you need to defer based on OSAP or out of province aid or your major award. So that's all by the August 27th deadline. One thing I do want to flag for those of you who are assigned, who are living in a residence, typically in my experience, the residence fees are not added until a little bit later in the summer. So come mid-July, you will see an invoice that has your tuition. But if you're in residence, then most likely the fees will be added maybe a little bit later to the end of July or even early August. So if you do happen to make a payment in July, just make sure you go back and you check your invoice to see, okay, do I owe any fees for fall residence specifically? And make sure you pay those by the end of September. That would be when any remaining unpaid fall fees are due, okay? Um, and then I have some deadlines here for the winter term, and which applies to you depends on how you got registered. So if you registered by just making a payment, then your winter fees are due by the end of November. If you deferred your fees based on OSAP or out of province aid, then your winter fees are due by the end of January. And if you are fortunate enough to have a major award and you deferred based on that major award, all your fees are due by the end of April. So like I've already mentioned, I'm available to help review your budget or to help you create a budget this summer if that's something that you're interested in. I can help interpret OSAP rules and procedures. As I stated, I had OSAP as a student many years ago, and I'm familiar with the various, rules and procedures. And if at any point I feel like I can't answer the question or you need to talk to someone who can actually access your application, then I'll just tell you that you need to contact the university registrar's office. I can meet to discuss unmet financial need or financial emergencies. And as I've already said, the University Registrar's Office can assist with lots of specific questions around OSAP or out of province aid, U.S. student aid, or even UTAP's inquiries. Okay, so that is it for my presentation. I'm just going to check the chat to see if anyone has any questions or if, yeah, thank you so much, Dryden, for posting links. If anyone has a question, I think maybe we have like a minute or two, and then we're going to go into the next presentation. Again, you might feel more comfortable sending a specific email with like your scenario if you don't necessarily want to share those details here. Okay, I think we're good. I don't see any questions. Okay. Okay, so Johnson, when you're talking about deferrals, what does this mean? So deferral is a way to get registered. So you need to trigger registration, and you do that by either making a payment or you defer your fees, either by showing that you have financial aid or like out of province aid or OSAP, or you have a major award. If you're still uncertain about what that means, then just send us an email at registrar.innis and we can go over it in a little more detail. Are the fees for the entire year all $6,000 for in-province students? So the fees that I showed on the first slide, they were broken down. So there was tuition and then there was incidentals. So for an in-province, so for on a student from Ontario, the fees will likely be around $8,000. Like I mentioned before, the incidentals for 24-25 have not yet been finalized. So it would probably be like just over $8,000 for all your fees. Someone's asking, how do we know if we qualify for admission awards? Will they let us know? So if you were going to get an admission award, you would have already been notified. So if you haven't been notified, then you are not receiving an admission award, unfortunately.